In January, Dr. Akilah Watkins will take the helm as the first Black woman CEO of the independent sector, a national membership organization made up of nonprofits, foundations, change makers, and corporations working together to strengthen civil society. In her current role as president and CEO for the Center for Community Progress, Akilah leads the largest national effort focused on turning vacant spaces into vibrant places. Over her 25-year career as a national thought leader, conference speaker, and nonprofit executive, Dr. Watkins' work began at the age of 14 years old when she led efforts to convert a vacant lot and abandoned home into a community center in Roosevelt, New York. Since then, she served as an executive leader for nonprofits and community development initiatives, which include work with the Obama administration, NeighborWorks America, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Ford Foundation, and the Center for the Study of Social Policy. Her career's work has focused on helping people, communities, and local and federal government drive impactful reform for key issues including land banking, property vacancy, childhood obesity, community health, and economic development. From California to Long Island and Puerto Rico, Dr. Watkins' thought leadership on diversity, equity, and inclusion and community development has been featured by America's leading authorities and helped hundreds of communities. Those presentations and features include recognition by CNN, the New York Times, and Essence for her contributions to the field of community development. Good afternoon, everybody. We're here today with the Dr. Akilah Watkins. Good afternoon, Akilah.
Hi, Toya. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling great.
Feeling great on this election day.
I am feeling really great and hopeful on this election day. And so I got up really early this morning, voted in Prince George's County, which is a predominantly African-American district. And the entire county is African-American mostly. And it was full. It was packed. It's beautiful to see people bringing their children, young, old, coming to vote. So I had a great, great morning, performing my civic duty.
Absolutely. I'm going to go after we wrap here, Zachary and I, because our kids here in Illinois are out of school. In the Chicagoland area are out of school for election day. So it will be a family affair, same as you. So when we publish this, the third Wednesday of this month, which is next week, it'll be a post-election. So hopefully we will have the results that we're hoping for. Or if all else fails, one of us will win the Powerball and we can take our $100 million and
take our billions
and create a new life. So thanks for making time. I know it's the end of the year and you're wrapping up your days at the center. And, I have to say when the announcement posted that you would be the incoming CEO of the independent sector, there was just so much excitement. I know I reached out to you, my boss, Antoinette Malveaux, reached out to me, and then I reached out to others. So lots of enthusiasm, excitement, and, a great bit of energy in the sector. And so it's been a few weeks. What's it like we're excited, but what's it like for you sort of sitting with your decision, the announcement, and preparing to step into, a pretty significant role in the sector?
No, I think that's a great question. And Toya, thank you so much for the invite to talk with you today. I would do this no matter what I was doing or what was going on in the world, because you are a very dear friend of mine. As it relates to the announcement and where I'm at sort of energetically, psychologically, first of all, I am just so deeply humbled and excited by this opportunity, and that the board of independent sector really trusts me with the great responsibility of helping to facilitate, this amazing social mission field that we have, right? So we do so much in this society in terms of, really helping our most vulnerable families and communities, and stepping into a role where my job is to help facilitate the infrastructure of the social mission field, and being the first African American to get that honor in its more than 40-year history. It's a lot to hold. It's a lot to hold. I think it's just a byproduct of the times that we're in. But I'm also, if I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I am also just a bit like, I'm excited. And, to be totally honest with you, I am really getting myself together because I know I can step up to this challenge, but it is quite, scary, if I can be honest with you, and not scary in a way where, I can't do it, but scary in the way that this is a huge responsibility, and our work is not getting any easier. And that. And with the elections happening today and what that means for our communities, it just, and the role that the social mission field, the social sector field plays, they play such a pivotal role in making sure that communities are together, that they're safe, that they're places of opportunity. We got a lot of work to do. And so, to just be in this position where I'm one of the influential voices, again, a huge responsibility. It is a lot of immense pressure. But, being a person of African descent, we're used to that. And we have a lot of collective strength and stories that we can pull from to get us through this moment. And I have amazing people like you and just folks in the field that I've been working with for decades now, who I know will help provide a sense of support and thought leadership around me that's going to help propel at least my leadership, I think, in a really, really good place. So that's a long way to answer to say excited. I've got butterflies. And I'm also going to be leaning on just the strength and courage of, my folks in the field. So.
Yeah, well, again, congrats to you because this is it's, we keep sort of living through these scary and exciting moments. The pressure points and the tension and the energy just continues to level up, in my opinion. And so for you to decide that you wanted to step into the arena in a different kind of way, in a different kind of space, at an organization like Independent Sector, I think speaks to your courage and your commitment to being part of trying to move and shift the field and the larger sort of sector of players in a new, a different way. So when you talk about this social mission field, how would you describe the change that the field has experienced, right, since the top of 2020 and all that has come to pass and continues to evolve?
Yeah, so I think in a couple of different ways. One, our social mission field has played such a pivotal role in making sure that our communities were safe and getting the necessary resources that they need, whether that was food, equipment, in some ways rides, like all the way from small, like every day, like I need this to survive, all the way to systemic change and really pushing our federal government around our appropriations and why it was so important for local governments to be able to have these funds to be able to take care of their folks. So the sector has led on all of that work. And I think that's in one way how the sector has changed in some ways, is that while the sector has always been a vanguard in this country for taking care and focusing on the most vulnerable and working class of our society, in some ways it has become the safety net, in many ways. When we think about all the work and all the different partners the social sector showed up. I also think too, is that around this whole idea of racial equity, the social sector has been very explicit about talking about the importance of racial equity, creating safe spaces where those conversations are taking place. And it's nothing new for us. I mean, we know the historical and racist realities of the systems in which we have to live in. I think what has changed, though, is the social mission sector had just become a lot more clear and united and very explicit about a racial equity value system. And I think in a lot of ways that value system has been a North Star, for public, for private partners. And so again, I think the social mission sector is going to continue to evolve, but I think as it relates to the last 2 years, which have just been incredibly difficult for all of us, the social sector has really led in these spaces courageously. And again, everything from just providing basic needs all the way to influencing public policy.
So as you step into this role, you're coming from, community progress, and before that, you spent years working on the grant making side at philanthropic institutions, but you've been advocating for community development and fair, affordable, accessible housing since you were 14 years old. And we're not going to talk about how old you are now, but you've been doing it. You've been in this game for a long time. And so what would you say was your inspiration or the catalyst in your life at that time at 14 years old, where your voice and your vision sort of came to be at such a young age?
Yeah, so I think a couple of different things helped to shape me. One is that my family story is an American story, and my mother coming up from the South, coming to New York City for a better life, to get, to acquire a really good government job. And my father, who's an immigrant, coming over here from the West Indies with his dreams of home ownership. And so, my parents were one of the recipients of the Bethesda-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, which is one of the first CDCs in this country to provide home mortgages to African Americans. They were piloting this through the Lyndon B. Johnson administration. And my parents were one of the fortunate African Americans in New York City to be able to participate in this. I got inspired because I know really good public policy makes a huge difference. It's really what has created last 40 years, the safety, citizens, and the government in a lot of ways have deeply eroded. And for folks, and the reason why I got so inspired is because I think if people are willing to show up, if people get opportunities to develop their human capital, to give, to become productive citizens, people deserve opportunities to do that. They deserve opportunities to be able to buy an affordable home and to create a life for themselves, their communities, for their kids. They deserve that. And so I think understanding what my parents' journey was to homeownership, and understanding that sort of path to homeownership was being cut off from more and more families, especially more and more working class and families of color, it wasn't fair. It just simply wasn't fair. And so I think that level of unfairness has really sort of driven my passion throughout my entire career about providing opportunities, especially for homeownership, for people of color, especially low-income people of color. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
But what was the thing, right, at 14 years old that sort of raised your consciousness, awareness, the upset inside of you to start organizing and to start protesting? Like what button pushed you?
So the button that actually pushed me was that when I was 14, we didn't have, I grew up in an African-American community. And it was a working class, middle class African-American community. And people paid their taxes there. They worked hard. They committed to their community. And we didn't have not one summer youth employment opportunity in our community. It was summertime, school was over. Myself and a bunch of my friends, we literally did not have anywhere to work. And we saw communities that were around us growing up. Most of them were white communities in Long Island. And they had all these options for the summertime. And we did not. And I think that was sort of the spark that got me organizing and saying, this isn't fair. Our parents, and at the time, this same time, our town was actually suing our county for taxation without representation. So we had African Americans disproportionately paying property taxes. But again, at 14, I experienced not having any employment opportunities as a young person, even though the communities around us did. And so that's really sort of what got me going, is just deep levels of unfairness. I also grew up at a time when a lot of our sort of community and school programs were being cut around arts. And one of the first things I did is organize us as young people to actually start to host our own art program at school, right? And because while we knew math and science was important, people develop in multiple ways. And so I really pushed for us to develop arts programs in our communities. We raised money through having garage sales. I got people to donate stuff in the community. And with those, very slim dollars, we were able to begin, creating a local arts youth program, and additionally organizing around getting summer employment. And so we did both, and I ended up being really successful doing both. So that's what really drove me.
And here we are, right, all these years later, where interest rates are now pricing folks out of homeownership once again. And as you have spent so many years at Center for Community Progress as CEO, working and advocating and continuing to organize, there's still a lot of work to do, and you're going to shift and do that work in another space. But can you talk about, I often ask this question of myself and of others, right? Like, what do you give? What do you gain? And what are you leaving behind? So in the case of your time at the center, what would you say you gave and what you look to as a success? And what do you learn? What did you gain as a result of that time there? And then the last part is, what did you leave behind? Meaning, what is the legacy that will be there when you slide up to a new desk in January 2023?
I love these questions, Toya. I really, really do, because they're different, right? These questions make you really have to reflect and dig deep. So I will say this.
And I will say
Go ahead, no.
they are framed to help us claim, right, our story in a way
Yes.
that we're just not often given an opportunity to sit and think and reflect and then give voice to these things that are so meaningful to what we contribute to our communities.
Oh, thank you for that. I needed that. So let me answer the question directly. Toya, I was really scared to take on CCP when I got there. This was an amazing organization, but the country, the affordable housing world, wasn't necessarily talking about property vacancy. But I took it because the work that the organization does in terms of helping local governments look at the systemic reasons why they have vacant properties and how they can convert those properties into assets, that was part of my story. Mm-hmm. That was part of my story growing up in Roosevelt, New York, where we took a vacant property and actually transformed it into a community center. So I felt like I was coming 360 in my life. I think when I took this position, I was one, if any, African-American women running a community development organization, a national one in the country. So again, and I was the first leader of color to run the organization at Community Progress. So, I walked into something that was a huge responsibility. And I'm going to tell you some of my legacy pieces, because I really, really try to be as thoughtful about these as possible. So one of the first things I built at the center was the National Land Bank Network. This is, Community Progress is the national leader in land banks. And we've had that title for about 10, 12 years now. However, though, we've never sort of brought the more than 200 land banks together, right? So we work with them and we bring them, facilitate conversations, but to actually create sort of a formal network where learning takes place and power building takes place, that we didn't do that for whatever reason. Under my tenure, that was one of the major things I took on and decided that I wanted to build this entire network. The land bank network space hasn't traditionally been a space that people of color have entered. And that's a lot of different reasons, mostly because it's a lot of folks that are in the space are or local government officials. And so one of the things I was able to build is for us to create an affinity group where we can actually grow and nurture leadership of color in this space. Two, really, as we built the National Land Bank Network, the other thing is, how do we grow our work and influence in rural spaces? So this is another area that we built. Also, part of the network, I actually got legislation introduced into Congress twice, in the 116th Congress and now in the 117th Congress. And then it got endorsed by multiple large national community development organizations. So we don't get a lot of opportunities to help to influence and write and introduce legislation into Congress. And I was just incredibly honored and grateful to be working bipartisanly. Now, I want to be clear, I've worked, we've worked with both, Congressman Kildee in Michigan, and also Congressman Ferguson in Georgia. And them and their staffs have been amazing as they've worked together and really prioritized small and mid-sized cities. So that was one of the things I built, created, raised roughly around $4 million for, and really just expanded our work as a center. I didn't see COVID coming, didn't see it. So, and I started this work literally 60 days after getting to CCP in 2017. So by the time COVID came, we at the center were just so uniquely positioned to be able to really grow this work. The other thing that I've worked on at CCP, part of my legacy, is growing the CEO of Color Circle. I mentioned I was one, the only African-American woman running a national community development organization. And then also the president of LIST was at that time, he's now moved on. We were the only two folks running these national orgs. And so as the field became more and more diverse, myself and a couple of other colleagues of mine, Lisa Rice from National Fair Housing Alliance, and also Hala Fareed, who was formerly at Citibank, we really were like, we should be bringing together all these leaders of color. We're all coming into power at the same time. How do we really begin to support each other? Now, when I did the invite for the circle to have dinner the first night, I had no idea it was going to grow to what it is today. What the circle has morphed into is actually helping to create a different sort of leadership paradigm, right? We're at about 8 or 9 leaders of color now, 9 of us, I believe. And we're Black, right now we're Black, Brown, and Asian leaders. And we are just very committed to creating new paradigms of trust building, partnership, sharing resources, leveraging our expertise and our value. Our whole premise is that, we're always talking, we do want more leaders of color in the field, but we don't want leaders of color to come in and replicate the same behaviors that have historically been in the field. We don't want that, right? I know representation does count, it does matter, and I think it's important. And with more representation, we can bring different styles, different ways, different value systems. And the CEO Circle demonstrated that. We've been working together now for 4 years. And we have, and I'll just give a couple of examples. We've supported each other on legislation, which is huge to have this level of partnership. To fundraise, again, and it doesn't because we had to get out of that mind frame of scarcity, of funding scarcity. So to bring leaders of color together where we're co-fundraising. And then the third thing is we actually wanted to look at how do we grow the pipeline of leaders of color? We don't want this to be a moment in our field, but rather how do we solidify what we've learned, what we've gone through, how we are building authentic leadership now? How do we learn from what we're doing in an effort to scale it across multiple fields? And so we've hosted some national convenings. We held one in Puerto Rico earlier this year when we had 65 BIPOC leaders. Part of our work is about creating space and really tackling some of those large issues that are impacting our community, like climate resiliency, right? Along with other issues. So those are two of the things I am so proud about. I mean, I could talk about all the money we raised. The other thing I'm super proud about is I didn't have to furlough not one staff member during COVID, and really made sure that my staff had health benefits, and we created space for people to connect and talk. All those things I'm deeply proud about. But those, in terms of my legacy, it's really the National Land Bank Network and the CEO Circle.
Yeah, and what you've described, right? I often reference the Centering Ourselves report that Frontline helped produce last year that really spoke to the ways in which Black women sort of showed up, leaned in, and led the field of philanthropy in 2020 and the first half of 2021. And what you describe in your sort of legacy contributions to the organization, but to the broader field, right, sort of speaks to some of the research findings around the unique sort of power analysis and power building commitment that Black women bring to these leadership positions, and that sort of is born out of our lived experience and lived expertise. And you bringing to all of your roles that 14-year-old activist and organizer, and the tenets of those values continuing to guide your leadership demonstration. And so it's the, not just the ingenuity, but the innovation to open up space and see the possibility beyond your own leadership, and to see the power in convening and organizing for sustainability's sake, right? Understanding that you have a role to play for the given moment in time, that it's your role, but there is a collective contribution that will be far more powerful in creating the change that we want to see in the world that we want our children to ultimately inherit. So thank you for continuing in that legacy and in that commitment to when you get a seat at the table, making space for others, creating new tables, bringing philanthropy and community based organizations and community organizers together in Puerto Rico, as a way to sort of open up the conversation to our brothers and sisters in other parts of the community, right, who are often just not part of the conversation, not an integrated sort of focused conversation. And so I would agree that those are significant legacy contributions that will have helped to change the field and will help to sustain the presence of other leaders of color. So thank you for that. And you should be proud. You absolutely should be proud.
No, I appreciate that. And as it relates to all of the work is going to continue. So the National Land Bank Network is going to continue when I leave because it's strong. And I've made a point to build an infrastructure, right? Because we want things to live beyond the leader.
Absolutely.
With the CEO Circle of Color, that work is growing now. So I'm excited to hopefully to play a continued role in that work in my new role at Independent Sector. And to really sort of understand what made the CEO Circle work and be able to modulate parts of it, because we do get a lot of calls from folks like, how do we do this in education? How do we do this in policy? And we get calls like that all the time. And so I think, I want to work with some of my research partners to really be able to understand and do some case studies around what has worked. How do we build new leadership paradigms? How do they get supported? And how do we begin to educate the larger field around what does it mean to be in community and in partnership, and get rid of the old paradigms that really want to promote competition.
Absolutely.
Organizations. We got to bring all of our resources to the table. We don't have any time to be parting out and you're a favorite and you're not a favorite. None of that. We got to come to the table with our best ideas. We got to roll up our sleeves. We got to work together. We got to build trust. And so that work, I want the audience to know that work plans to continue.
And I imagine that work will transition with you to the independent sector. And so, the independent sector has a membership, a really interesting mix of members, right? From foundations and nonprofits to corporations and then individual change makers. So as you prepare to lead this, what I call a range of influential partners and agitated players, Um, what are you most looking forward to? And do you have a sense of what some of the challenges might be?
Well, I'm mostly looking forward to engaging with our members. Um,
How
you know,
many members, by the way? I couldn't find that number.
I actually knew that number. It's well over 1,000 members. No, wait, I want to say it's between 500 and 1,000 members. So I'm looking forward to engaging with our members
Mhm.
and really understanding, what their worlds are looking like on the ground. And so that's one of the things I'm really interested in. I think the other thing too is, what are those important conversations happening in the field that independent sector can lend its capital to, its social capital to, and really help to amplify. And so I'm really looking forward to not just, understanding what those sort of larger policy conversations are, because, those are happening and those are important, and independent sector is playing an important role in all of that. But also, what are those sort of important HR issues that are facing the field? How do we think about our own human capital needs as, you know, as a sector? Where are they at today? Who do we need? What do we need in the next 3, 5, 10 years? Our sector is growing. We're the third largest sector in the country, and that is, on target to continue to grow. And so,
Mhm.
how do we make sure that our sector is strong and that they are well trained, and they have the necessary benefits that they need in order to make sure that they can come and be at 100% every day? How do we do that and also prepare for the work that's ahead of us? So I think those are some of the things. Um, and again, having these really facilitated conversations and understanding what are the major challenges and issues happening in the field today. So all that sort of stuff deeply, deeply excites me. In terms of the challenges, part of what we got to do, part of what our biggest charge is to be responsive, right, to what's happening in society. So, I think it's like, how do you continue to build a strong sector, um, and build a responsive sector, right? Build a sector that has that's very aligned in its values around racial equity, and then think about what are the unique challenges facing our society now and how does our sector show up for that, right? So I think those are because I always make jokes about this, that before COVID, I produced this beautiful strategic plan. I mean, girl, it's over a year. Board input, staff input. I mean, I do everything very sort of collective. And then COVID happened. And then that whole plan, I mean, we took parts of it, but that the plan didn't feel as sort of like relevant anymore, right? Because the world was turned upside down, and we all had to sort of roll up our sleeves and figure out, like, wait, how do we survive? How do we hold the line? And I think the same, in a lot of ways with our sector, like, we have to think about the future and chart a future for our sector, whether you're a foundation, an organization, or individual actor. And how do we do that and still be responsive to what's happening? How do we be responsive to climate disasters that are constantly inundating the Southeast? What does it look like to build a strong social support network in that region? What does it look like? So I think those are some of the things that keep me up at night. Um, which is why I think it's important to work through our membership, to work through really smart national thought leaders and partners, because, the independent sector, in a lot of ways, we want to lead on issues, but we also want to be a trusted facilitator on issues too. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are some amazing partners, when I think about like this, your response, and then this next question about sort of the community and leadership landscape of Black women. When you talk about the Southeast, I was just in Atlanta 2 weeks ago with Janine Lee and Tiffany and Utoya from Philanthropy Southeast. They convened a conversation to support the Voice Vision Value Book Project, but they had Black women from 8 Southern states. And, folks from Louisiana and Georgia and Arkansas and Mississippi, all sort of working, right, in community to address, right, climate justice, the water crisis, the sort of ongoing pressure points that really sort of leave communities in a place of constant crisis.
Yeah.
And it is no longer a rapid response fund, right? It's no longer a crisis management plan. It's how do you always manage in a place of preparedness for when the crisis strikes, in anticipation that there will be another hurricane season, and every hurricane season, right? The intensity of the storms just continues to mount. And so, there's a demand on leadership that is constant and unrelenting. And the supports that we need as we step into new and emerging roles is equally as important from a thought partnership and a strategy perspective, but our own well-being, our own, sense of health and wellness, and having a soft place to land as a community. And you talk about the CEO circle that you created at Community Progress, but for you as a leader, this is your second role as CEO, is that accurate? So can you talk about, right, like, how do you take care of yourself, and where are those spaces and places where you go to be supported and nurtured, because you're creating them for others, but what does it look like to have it for yourself?
So Toya, I was really hoping you wasn't going to ask this question. Beyond. So, okay. So in all honesty, yes, a large part of any leader's job, part of my job, has been about creating nurturing spaces, both for my staff and also for leaders in the field. That's what the CEO Circle did when we were in Puerto Rico, and going to continue to do that work. But what do I do for me? Right? Like I am holding a lot. And for your audience, just so you know, I'm a mother of 3 children.
They're beautiful children, but
they are beautiful children, but they
need a lot.
Nonetheless.
They need a lot.
They need a lot. And they're all at very unique ages. So I have a 15, 11, and a 9-year-old. So just to give everybody, more context. So I think a couple of things. If I can be honest with you, one of the most important things in terms of taking care of myself is getting a really good assistant. If I can just go on and talk truth here. I have an amazing assistant. I've had, maybe the last 5 years of just amazing assistants, and they just help you tremendously. Okay. I want to tell every woman, and I definitely want to tell every Black woman out there that is in leadership or stepping into leadership, spend the money. Really do your due diligence. Get somebody in there that can really help you organize your life. They're a partner with you. So I just need.
No one has ever asked you. No, that's the first time anybody has ever raised that as a checkpoint, right, for well-being and the sustaining of one's sanity. But you are right. That is a critical partner in life.
It's a critical partner. And I think, when I first started at CCP, I had a coach, and, I was like, look, girl, I can do it myself. I don't really need a great assistant. I just need somebody to just do some little stuff here and there, help me with some board materials. And my coach was like, oh, child, you don't get it yet. You don't get it. So when I finally did get it, she was absolutely right. So I will just tell people, find the talent, grow the talent. I really invest in all my staff, but I definitely invest in my executive assistant, because they have just been amazing in terms of helping to organize my life and to make sure that I hold my boundaries. So that's the other thing. We get into this work because we want to give. And so it's important for us to know like where our boundaries are. And if you're me, I want to say yes to everything, right? And having a really good executive assistant really helps you so you don't sort of tire yourself out, right? Or expend all your energy. I think the second thing is, this is not rocket science, is to actually just go exercise. Like, Toya, I definitely carve out time, and my assistant does this for me in my calendar. That's what I'm saying, a good assistant. I go to the gym. It is my time. I put on music. I literally listen to podcasts. Sometimes I listen to a webinar. That's my time. I got to go to the gym. I need to work out and just be really, really as healthy as I possibly can. We cannot expect our bodies to carry us the way we need, girl. And sometimes we go so hard for so long and we do not give our bodies what it needs, right? So part of that is, just managing what we eat, managing, all that sort of stuff, but carve out that time. Yeah. Go to the gym. Just go ahead. I don't care if you walk around your neighborhood. Something you should be spending an hour on yourself every single day. So I will just say
and this is from a mom with 3 kids.
I have 3 kids. So I'm doing homework, tutors, riding them around, taking them. I want you to know, like, I'm a real mama. I'm not a fake mama. I'm a real mama. And to be honest with you, I don't have a bunch of sort of nanny support. I've tried, but just the economic market is in a really crazy place now. So a lot of this stuff I have to do. But I also have really great support. This is the third thing. Really try to build in some really great support. So I have great parents. I have a great co-parenting relationship right now with my ex-husband. And and between those two, it's been amazing. We can't do it by ourselves, sisters. We really need extra layer of support. So whether you have to outsource it and pay through a nanny, or you can really work with your family to do so, do it, because we can't do this by ourselves. So I think those are, and then the last thing, Toya, this was having a really good, solid group of friends. Yeah. I think that, like, really supportive group of friends, that's really, really important. I've just been extraordinarily lucky to have a group of sisters that have been around me for years. Laugh with them, travel with them, spend time with them. It is important. We need downtime. We need that. And you need people that can put the mirror up to you and tell you, girl, I ain't understand what that was all about. Let me just check in with you real quick. Like, you need those people that you trust enough that can help you sort of work through even your stuff, right? Yeah. So you need your tribe. You need them, and invest the time in your tribe, because when you're in a leadership position, it's so hard because you spend so much of your time sort of working and managing, and you're out there, and you need people you can connect with, people that you can be vulnerable with, people you can be soft with, laugh with. You need your tribe. So I will, I'll stop there, but those are just some of the ways that I take care of myself. And don't feel guilty about taking care of yourself. That's the other thing, ladies. We got to do it. We're worth it. And when you don't take care of yourself, the alternative is a lot worse. So, we have to make a commitment to put ourselves priority list. Yeah.
And I think all of these, from the exercise, the support system, and, a friend group, and that friend group sort of, is at the intersection of support and friendship, right? Yeah. But for those of us who are parenting, we're also and parenting daughters, they're watching us, right? And so when they see others supporting us and stepping in and helping to fill the gap, and us making time for ourselves, and us being in friendship with other women, right? That's all modeling, right? How you sort of organize your life in a way that is integrated and somewhat balanced. It's not always balanced, right? But they see the effort being put forth and they are learning a new way of sort of being and sort of operating as a mom, as a co-parent, as a working person, right? And as an individual, sort of moving through the centering of our own humanity first and foremost, and not giving it all away. I think that's critically important for our kids to see.
It's critically important. It is. I want to just really amplify your point. It's okay for us to be honest with our children too. I've really deeply appreciated my kids, and because of COVID and just all of the transition, I made sure to get my kids a therapist because I really wanted them to be able to have the emotional language to support themselves and go through, COVID was hard for all of us, but also to help me, and I think that's important too, for our kids to know, mommy is super busy tonight. Let me see how I can help her, and be able to have the language to say, hey, mom, I'll go and cook dinner, just relax, right? I see you're a bit like really, really busy. That has been like amazing. Our kids are watching us and they are learning. And I also have really tried to instill in my kids, how do you provide levels of support? How do you show up and provide levels of support, both to yourself, to your siblings, and to your mom?
Absolutely. I've said to my son, sometimes he'll walk in the room and he'll ask for a thing. And I'll say, so I want you to just like observe what's happening right here, right now. When you come into a room, observe what's happening before you ask for anything. And then decide, is this a moment to receive or is this a moment to give, right? Are you asking or are you offering something? And it's been really interesting as he gets older to see that coming into practice for him. But, be in the middle of something, it's like, can I have a bowl of ice cream? Really? I'm literally loading the washing machine. Like, I could see if I was eating ice cream and you wanted some. But yeah, sort of helping them be a little bit more aware of what's going on around them, so that they can be active, contributing members of a household and of a family unit, right? Is so important, especially for our boys.
It's important. So yes.
Yeah. So, how would you say, with all that you've experienced in building, the support systems and helping to sort of build the field in the ways that you've described, I think there's a unique value contribution that Black women have brought to philanthropy in the past 20 years. We're now the largest community of color represented, and as you've indicated, the third largest sector in the country. And I think there's unique value there. I think there's a legacy there. And you've been in relationship with many women over the course of your career. But how would you describe the field having been changed by the contribution of Black women? And then how would you describe your own leadership evolution over the past? We were fellows in 2005.
We were.
So within that sort of 17, so let's just sort of bookend it in that 17 years, which is a long time. I said to Erica Seth Davies, who was also a fellow with us, I was like, when we were fellows in 2015, she's like, you need to wind that clock back.
Jesus, Toya. I ain't even had no children then, girl. Erica ain't had no kids either.
Yeah, no, I did not. Tanya was pregnant with her youngest daughter when we were fellows, right? So yeah.
Toya, I think this is a really great question. And I'm going to try to answer it as My leadership has changed or evolved because I think in some ways to be an effective leader, and particularly a Black woman leader, we all got to do our work. We got to all do our work on ourselves. Like, we don't get to skip that part. We got to work through what it means to have power, what it means to walk into some rooms that people don't value you as much. How do you sort of show up there? How do you lead people that may have never been led by a Black person, a Black woman, right? Like, how does, I grapple with that. I know you grapple with that. Like, we've all grappled with that. And so I think in some ways I've given myself and even people around me permission to feel those feelings, like feel them. And I don't have to try to sort of stop those feelings. I don't have to deny those feelings. I don't even have to prove those feelings wrong. They can just exist there. I'm okay with us having authentic moments as long as we're working through a process of how to, So I think that's one of the things that I've sort of like grown in my leadership around. And two, I can be a nurturing, caring leader that gets amazing results. Like, I think that's the other thing. We don't have to dichotomize that. Like, I struggle sometimes when I see how Hollywood sort of characterizes leadership, especially Black women leadership sometimes, or we like get in there, we're like, we gotta, kick down doors and take
We're
names.
emulating white men, right? We're emulating the leadership demonstration of white men. And I'm like, this is not entertaining to me. Because I don't know anybody who behaves that way. I don't know any individual who behaves that way.
And I hate when I don't want to see nobody try to embody these sort of very negative characters. You can be caring. One of the things I did during COVID is made sure that we like upped our health insurance, our mental health services for our staff, right? I know people were moving to austerity measures, but I was like, no, everybody needs to have access to, medical health care and physical health care. We all need access to this, right? So you could be caring, loving, and nurturing and still be a dope leader, and be effective and get some kick-ass results. I need people to understand they're not dichotomous. That, you can show up. So I think that's one of the things. I think the second thing is, I love the fact that sisters are showing up in their full selves. When I started in this work, that wasn't always the case. Like, we always sort of had to contort. We had, your name was this when you home, but at work it was something else, all that, and can't wear your hair somewhere. It's all of this, can't come in dressed in yellow, all that, we couldn't sort of authentically show up and, and just sort of be in our fullness. And I think I've seen that change. Let me tell you something, I've seen sisters step into it. Just go on and just step into who you are, baby. This is your moment. And I love that. I love the fact that our sector has made space for Black women to show up in their fullness more than it did when I started out all those years ago. But I will also say this, in terms of Black women leadership, I've had some amazing Black women leaders. Shout out to Leslie Grady. She's out everywhere. And I've also had some not great experiences. And so I also, one thing that, I've had to come to terms with is that, everybody that teaches you something isn't always going to be wonderful. And that's okay too. You still have so much to learn. From amazing Black women in the field, and they have a right to show up in ways, in ways that sort of are aligned with who they are. And sometimes that isn't the way we sort of imagine them showing up, and that's okay. Like, I want us to understand that we still have a lot to learn, from those women. I think the last thing is that, and this goes to my last point, some of my amazing mentors haven't always been people that I expected. I've had people take chances on me. I've had wonderful chances on me. I've had people teach me things, give me access, and they were very different from the people I thought should be able to give me access. So I will just say that your blessings can come from a lot of different places. Your angels can be in many disguises. Be open for that. And to know that there is enough sort of women, like, really, I would love to see Black women get more opportunities to show up in their fullness. That they don't always have to, be scared to sort of demonstrate their own, their leadership, right? And that there are nurturing places for them to do that. I think that is gonna, as Black women continue to assume amazing leadership opportunities in this sector, I also think it's important for us to support them. So they know that they have a very strong community of folks, behind them and with them. So I think all of that is, within that. I hope I was as honest as possible around that. But yeah.
No, I appreciate you sort of describing how the very ways in which we show up have evolved since, over the course of our careers. I was talking to my cousin's daughter. Her name's Alex. She's 6, and we have a girls' club. So it's me and Alex's grandma, who's my aunt. And she said to me, we need briefcases and suits for our girls' club. And that's what came to mind when you talk about how, there was a time when we showed up with briefcases and suits.
Briefcases, baby.
With briefcases, and now we got backpacks, and it's we were all wearing our hair a certain kind of way, and it just all looks very different. It just all looks very different, and it feels different. But it feels different, right?
Happy you said that. Yeah,
it feels different, and even in the case of when we don't always show up for one another in the ways in which we expect. Even understanding that it's not personal. It's not personal. And there is a reason why we show up the way that we do, and being able to have grace with ourselves and compassion for ourselves, and then showing that to one another is critically important. And so I appreciate you sort of talking through the evolution of the field and your own leadership with those lessons in mind, because it is really, really true. And I think you're lucky if you get to sort of be situated in a space long enough, whether that's an interpersonal relationship, a field of, your professional field, your family dynamics, right? To where you get to have enough years behind you where you can reflect and come to that sense of peace and understanding for the ways in which we, as people who share an experience, the ways in which we've grown and the ways in which we still need to be there to support one another.
I
because
agree.
those experiences are often grounded in a lot of harm and a lot of pain. And it's not an excuse, it's the reality, right?
Well, Toya, you're absolutely right. And, I think one of the hardest things, I was really frightened when I started at Center for Community Progress. I thought, I was a Black woman running, this national organization that, I didn't know whether or not to make a decision, not make a decision. That's why I'm like creating these spaces. Part of the reason why I created the CEO Circle is just so I can have levels of support, right? Like, support is so important. And especially for Black women leaders, it is so important because you are providing the support for so many folks in your life. If you're in a partnership, you're providing a high levels of support. You're a mother, you may have aging parents. And so where do you go and get these levels of support. And so it is totally normal for Black women leaders to be scared, to, anybody would be scared, right? There's nothing abnormal about that. But where do you go for relief? Where do you go to be vulnerable and to be safe? And so that's part of the reason why I want to create these communities where, represented leaders like myself can tap into. Right. Because if not, we don't want Black women operating out of a sense of fear as they're leading. Right. We don't need that. We need them to feel deeply secure, supported, have, communities where they can be vulnerable and transparent, and that information is going to be safe and not be used or weaponized against them. Right. I think that is what I'm really pushing for and striving for. And then helping people understand how they can best support Black women. I think that's the other thing. Like, I'm not putting all the onus on us because we've been showing up, working, doing every damn thing for so long.
Yeah. For everybody.
For everybody. So now it's like, well, how do people show up and support you? How does your senior team show up and support you? We talked a little bit about how your young people, your kids show up. We need to start re-socializing people, how they can help show up and support Black women.
Absolutely. So the next Voice, Vision, Value research report is centering on that question. What does it look like? Yeah, what does it look like? What does it take for philanthropy to get ready for Black women's leadership, to recruit, retain, sustain, and support Black women's leadership? Because again, given our representation in the field, we are sort of making decisions and supporting the broader field up and down the talent pipeline. And so there's a conversation and a set of lessons and strategies that some organizations have developed and deployed more successfully than others. And so what are they? And what does it look like for Black women to answer that question? Right. To sort of describe, design, and inform what we need and for the field, and to provide that intelligence to one another even, right? So that I know what I should be asking for, how I should be positioning myself if I choose to apply to be the CEO of the Center for Community Progress as you transition to your next gig.
Right. I mean, first of all, Toya, I'm so excited that you're having this conversation and really highlighting how Black women show up in this work and how the field gets ready for their leadership. It's an important one. This is such an exciting time in our history, and I don't want us to lose this moment, Toya. So because of your leadership and having these dialogues and conversations, this is important because this, I could just tell you and your audience that, we have created this sort of mystique around what it means to be a leader, right? So, as leadership positions became more and more available in the field, I would reach out to a lot of my Black women friends. Girl, that I got kids, I got this, I got that. And I'm like, no, you are the person that can do it, right? Because for all the reasons we know, the unique standpoint in which Black women sit at both the intersection of race and gender, and sometimes class, like how they show up in this work, like having that sort of, tribe perspective is so important, right? But a lot of them were like, look, I can't do this, because this is hard. And I don't know if I have enough support. So that's why I do think it's important for us to amplify that. No, leadership is changing and it's going to come in many different forms. Yeah. And Black women need high levels of support because they are the caretakers in a lot of respects in their families. And anyway, there's a lot of different reasons, but I think this conversation is really important.
Absolutely. And the pin I'll put in that is what we're seeing is Black women are stepping into these roles mid-career, whereas 15, 20 years ago, our elders were stepping into these positions as the final point of their career, right? So you as a mom of three prepubescent, adolescent teenagers becoming, a CEO for the second time, right? At this point in your career, again, you are going to bring a completely different perspective to what are the issues at the intersection of working families, right? Because that is you're having to operationalize all of those things every day, and how, from a policy perspective, from an institutional perspective, from a field perspective, right? These are the things that we have to be thinking about around policy, practice, operation, structure, to really create the kinds of communities that are going to support the ability for families to thrive. Because that's, at the end of the day, what all of this is about.
Absolutely, Toya.
Healthy families that are thriving, children that have what they need, and families that have the support that they need so that their babies will be safe and healthy, right? So we're going to wrap this up with one final question for you. And again, thank you for making the time, because I know you got a lot going on. A lot going on. But the last question is, right, what I ask everybody, when you think of voice, vision, and value, which word resonates with you most and why?
Vision does. I think it's important for us to try to solve these really big, intractable problems. I think we need to bring our ideas to the table. And I think that when we have a vision of the work, or where we want it to go, or how we want to solve these problems, such as wealth inequality, violence in our communities, like, these are huge issues. And I'm really excited about just the different types of leadership that's coming to lead these efforts. We need some vision. We don't need people that are simply going to keep the trains on the tracks, right? We don't need people that are very concerned about their own position and standing, but rather we need people that are going to be bold, that are going to be innovative, that are going to push, right? We need that. And so I think vision is really important. And I'll say this too, vision also allows people to figure out how they show up in the work. So, the National Land Bank Network is one of my babies at Center for Community Progress. It allowed every person in the organization to now work on that. And we co-created how they show up, right? So when you develop a vision, and it's not sort of personality driven, but really about solving real problems, people buy in. They begin to create connection to the work and to the outcome of that vision. And I think that's important. That's what keeps movements alive past any individual leader. So vision is what resonates with me.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Akilah, again, for making the time, for continuing to commit yourself and your talent to making this world a better place. For families, and out of respect, out of reverence to your parents and to the people in your community when you were 14 years old, who inspired you and who organized with you and stood with you in protest, for you all these years later to be carrying on in that spirit, holding to those values, and most importantly, holding a deep belief that we can do better, that we can do better for ourselves and for one another. And so you, like so many Black women, continue to hold that in their hearts and push forward every day. And so we are grateful for you stepping up and stepping in such a time as this, continuing to believe that we can do better. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Toya. I really appreciate it. And thank your audience too. Incredibly humbles for this invitation.
Take care, enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully we will wake up tomorrow morning more hopeful. And if not, energized and invigorated to keep pushing.
Absolutely, Toya. Absolutely. Go vote if you
Go
haven't.
vote if you
Go
haven't
vote.
already. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Toya.